Imagine being 14 years old and suddenly becoming responsible for everyone in your family. That was the reality of my grandfather. At an age where most kids were just playing with their friends, he was standing on the street corners of Sicily playing the accordion just to earn a few pennies, trying to survive because his father had died so unexpectedly. His life forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. When life knocks us down, do we stay parked in our pain or do we find the courage to drive on? My Nonno died when I was young. From here on out, I'm going to say Nonno because I've actually never said grandfather in my entire life, and that's a very weird word for me. So, Nonno is grandfather in Italian. But he died when I was very young, and to be honest, I never really got to know him. But his life story that I've heard about so much has shaped me in a lot of actually very profound ways that I'm still really discovering, which I find extremely fascinating. And I want to just take a second to imagine what I said in the very beginning about being a child who, again, should be playing, learning, and now suddenly having this weight of having to survive and take care of his family because he only had a mom and a sister. So now he was the man of the house. The thing is, he was super resourceful, though. He actually ended up borrowing money from one of his aunts to buy this accordion so that he could play on the streets of Sicily, and he taught himself how to play as well. Later, as a young man, probably around my age, maybe even earlier, he traveled all the way to South America to find work and to send money back home. And for over 20 years, this is what he did. He worked, he provided, he took care of others. And I guess I'll never know exactly if he wanted to, but I mean, he had to. And I'm sure there was some want mixed into there. And the reason that I talk about this and I bring this up is that I've thought a lot about his life and compared it to mine. And it sometimes makes my own struggles feel very, very small. But what strikes me most when I hear stories about him and his life is that my mom makes it very clear that he never complained. He never really wallowed. He just faced what was in front of him and he kept moving forward. And my nonno is what I would call, or my word that you're going to learn today, is what I call a victor and not a victim. And that's what I want to talk about today, being a victor in life and not a victim. And this is a very hard truth. And I think this is going to be a difficult podcast episode. I think a lot of people probably aren't going to like what I have to say about this, but we are all victims at some point. And I don't think that's negative. I think that's just reality because every single one of us faces something that we don't deserve. But I don't think being a victim is an identity. I think it's just a universal human experience. But a victor, I think that is our choice. And that's a decision to say, yeah, this happened to me, but it won't define me. So that's what we're going to be talking today at the podcast. Get in, you are driving. Welcome back, guys. We are cruising right along. In this podcast, we explore what it means to take the wheel in life's journey. I'm your host, Maria, and the message that I want to share throughout all my episodes is that you are in the driver's seat. And I never want you to forget that. And you have control over how you react to your life and where you want your life to go. And I compare it a lot to driving because when you think about it, life is a lot like driving. And actually, writing the podcast episodes for this has made me realize that because just in life, like in driving, there are unexpected detours, there are regular maintenance things, there's just a lot of things that will have you kind of spiral out of control. But the message that I always like to remind people is that you're driving, whether you feel like it or not, you are in that driver's seat and you always have the power to choose how you're going to respond. So, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. The reality of victimhood. So, like I said before, and I want this to be very clear, we are all victims because we all experience things that we don't deserve. And I think I can say this very confidently. Every single person, past, present, future, has faced something terrible that they didn't deserve. And again, I don't think being a victim is an identity. I think it's a fact. Now, can we sit here and compare this person's hurt to this person's hurt? Yeah, I guess we could say they had it worse, they didn't have it worse. I don't know. When we get into those things, it gets really complicated because I also don't want to invalidate like other people's feelings. I mean, for example, right? Like even if I compare my life to my nonno's, it's different. So that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But why does this happen, right? Well, because life is a biatch. Like, let's be real. Life is a biatch. We all know. We've all experienced it. It's unfair, it's full of suffering, and that's never going to change, especially the unfair part. So, if you're feeling like all these things that happen to me are unfair, they are. Like, they absolutely are. But I think when you can have this understanding, like, okay, we're not playing on the same playing field. Some people start here and some people start here. If you're not watching on video, my hands are going higher and lower. But um, I think when you can fully accept this, life does get a little bit easier and not in a give up kind of way or a pessimistic doom and gloom, but in an honest and grounded way that life is unfair. Because yeah, I mean, suffering is going to show up, like it will, and you might be very blindsided by it sometimes. But I think when you have this outlook, you'll be able to face it knowing it's part of what it means to be human. I know that I used to be terrified of all the bad things that could go wrong in my life. I was very shriveled up with fear about loss, about pain. I mean, everything, right? And I think I needed to admit this to myself. It's scary. Like, yes, I will confirm right now. It's really scary. You don't know what will happen. Death is scary. Loss is scary. Grief, sickness, betrayal, abuse. These are terrifying things that are a reality of life. And again, life is petrifying. These things are going to come. Bottom line. But the question isn't whether or not they're going to happen or not, because we know to an extent they will. The question is, how will you respond when they do? So, something I've noticed is that our brains are actually wired for victimhood. And I found a study on this, and I will make sure to share it. And again, this isn't my opinion, it's backed by science. And the study is in a journal called Neuropsychologica that dives into what's called negativity bias. And this is a real scientifically proven phenomenon where our brains are more sensitive to negative information than positive information. We are neurologically inclined to blame, to deflect, to say, this is happening to me, instead of asking, what can I do about it? It's so much easier to feel sorry than it is to take responsibility. Why? Because our brains weren't designed to make us thrive. They were designed to keep us safe. Our amygdala, the brain's fear center, is constantly scanning for threats. When something bad happens, our brains prioritize it. This negativity bias means when we're more sensitive to pain than pleasure. We remember trauma more than joy. We are deeply influenced by our negative experiences than our positive ones. This probably helped our ancestors survive, especially in those caveman days. But today, I think it can really trap us because if we're not aware of it, we start living our lives from a place of fear and victimhood by default. And let's be honest about something else. In today's world, identifying as a victim, I would say, is almost kind of trendy. I can't even tell you the amount of conversations I had where I can just tell their underlying message is basically, I'm a victim. Like, this is how a lot of people feel, and they carry it as their identity and how they see themselves. And I want to say that I get it. Like, I really do understand when you've been hurt, deeply, deeply hurt by whatever, whoever, it leaves a mark. It stings and it sticks. It's not easy to just get up and move on. For instance, back to the negativity bias, this has me thinking about the stories that we tell ourselves. Um, about anything, but I'm gonna think about one about childhood. Like, how many times do you think about your childhood and you think about your parents and you remember all the horrible things that your parents did, and you're like, I don't wanna do it that way. I'm different. Why is it that we always go to those horrible things and we don't remember all the amazing things that they did? Like, start I want you to think about the stories you're telling yourself about people in your life and think to yourself, do I always tend to go to the bad and not the good? Because it's true, like we do. Oh, well, my mom was always late. She's always late. And this was a reality of my mom. I'm just going to be honest. But my mom was also a very positive person. But why is it that my brain wants to go first to, but my mom was always late. It hurt me so badly. Like, yeah, that's true. That's true. But there's also so many other things about my mom that are great. But why does our brain go to the bad? Anyways, this just amazes me. And I think we all do this so much more than we even realize. Yeah, think about the stories that you're telling yourself about people in your life because it's so much easier to remember the garbage and not the good stuff. So, again, I was talking about how I understand because we are very deeply hurt. Um, it's not easy to just get up and move forward from these kinds of traumas and pains in our life. And one thing I want to say is that I do not believe in suppression. I do not think that you shouldn't act like you're not hurt at all. I no. That is just not good. I think it's toxic. I don't think you should just be like, you need to get over it. No, your pain needs to be acknowledged. And this is where I go back to I don't we just can't compare other people's pain to our own. Like, yeah, I mean, it also depends on how we define the pain, but I remember my friend once explained this to me super well. She's like, "Maria, let's say you twisted your ankle and you had to go to the hospital for that and have them check it out. But let's say that another guy comes in and he had some sort of heart problem. Okay, so from a physical point of view, we understand this well, right? Because obviously we're like, well, the guy with the heart problem has to go first. Like, oh, my ankle can wait. And that makes sense, right? It's true because if not, he will die. Like in the physical, this makes sense. But I think we do this also in the emotional, where we think, well, they were a victim of sexual abuse. So, my gosh, like I can't compare the trauma of my father being emotionally unavailable to that. And okay, I think we can say, yes, objectively they're different, but let's go back to the example of the heart versus the twisted ankle. Like, yeah, the twisted ankle doesn't have to be dealt with right away, but also if you don't deal with it at all and you keep walking on that twisted ankle, you're going to have a lot of problems moving forward if you never take care of it. And I think this is the best way to think about, because I know I've been a victim, I guess you could say, of feeling like, no, my pain doesn't matter. I'm just going to suppress. I need to get over this. Like, even when I think about my grandfather's story a lot, which I shared, it's like, well, I have no reason to be sorry for myself ever because look at what my grandfather had to do. I think that's wrong. I think, yeah, objectively, he had it harder than me, but I also need to take care of the things that have affected me as well. Now, this needs to be done with truth and balance because it's just very easy to blow it out of proportion, like I was saying, and just become this victim, victim, victim as well. So you really need to be able to balance it out yourself. But my whole point with this is that no pain should be suppressed, and everybody needs to think about how they need to be healing. So, again, whatever your particular pain is, it needs to be acknowledged, it needs to be felt, it needs to be processed because you can't heal what you refuse to face. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. I think we really need to remember that. here's where I think we need to make a distinction. Acknowledging your pain doesn't mean you have to park there permanently, doesn't mean that has to be your identity. You can recognize what happened to you and be like, that really hurt me, but not let it become your entire identity. And I think that's the choice we all face. So I'm going to say that again. You can acknowledge your pain with compassion, but you need to recognize that it doesn't mean you have to park there permanently. That what happened to you, and it doesn't have to become your entire identity. But again, you don't just forget it either. So I think the choice we all face is, do we stay parked in our pain, or do we find the courage to put the car in drive and move forward? Because you are so much more than what happened to you. You're so much more than your worst day. You're so much more than your deepest hurt. And you're so much more than the painful experience that you've occurred. And sorry, I'm getting a little teary eyed here because, I just really want people to understand this message and know that I'm not trying to not have compassion and say, just get over it all. I'm trying to tell you that, but if you don't and you choose to stay a victim, I think it will have a lot more negative effects. So, again, the victim stays parked in their pain. And I never want to minimize what you've been through because everyone's pain is real and valid. And if there's one thing I'll never do is tell somebody, well, no, sorry, your pain is invalid. No, you can't do that. Our pain is very real to us. But I also will not let you believe that you're powerless to move beyond it. And this is the biggest thing that I see. Okay, so I want to dive more into the power of choice. And this choice is going to be from victim to victor. So, again, the victim mindset usually says it's everyone else's fault. I can't get past this, I can't change, and it's all about me and my pain. Worst of all, I think this is what it says, whether you realize it or not. I have no control over my life or what happens to me. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that's terrifying to believe because that leaves you totally powerless, and it allows all these other people and your circumstances to have the power over you. And for me, it makes me feel like my experiences are the only thing that define me and that I'm forever trapped by what happened to me. And that's why I actually came up with the word victor a while ago. Maybe somebody else did, and I don't know, but it's something that I came up with in my writing. And it's what I want to call the victor mindset because I think my Nonno was a victor. I never truly got to know him as he died when I was very young and he had dementia. But from every single thing that my mom has said about him and what I have come to understand is that he was a fighter. And he wasn't just a survivor, he was a victor. Because I also think there's a big difference between being a survivor and a victor. Um, so again, what's the biggest difference between victim and victor? It's not about what happens to you, it's about how you respond. Because victims say this happened to me, victors say this happened to me, but I choose how to respond. So again, a super subtle shift, but well, actually no, more than subtle. It changes everything. So think about it. When you believe that you don't have control over something, you tend to become helpless, passive, stuck. But when you feel like you have power to change something and choose your response, you have agency again. You are back in the driver's seat. So I want to be clear. Choosing the victor mindset doesn't mean minimizing what happened to you. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It simply means refusing to let your hardships have the final say in your story. So, again, my grandfather lost his father when he was just a boy. He had to take care of his mother and his sister. Again, this child is suddenly becoming the provider. But, according to my mom, he was a great little salesman over there in Sicily. He borrowed money from my aunt to get this accordion so he could play music on the streets. And she said that he actually did a lot of different things to just be able to make money. And then a few years later, he did go to South America. And for over 20 years, if I did the math correctly, this man worked his butt off, like worked his butt off to provide for his mom, his sister, and then eventually my grandmother and the three children that they had, one of them being my mom. He really did not reach success and become very comfortable in life until I want to say the 70s when Venezuela, which was the country he went to, had this huge economic boom. So it was a lot of hustling and getting through it for a while. And again, even though I didn't get to know him well, I never got to sit and really talk to him. He's really somebody that I think about so often. I've really sat and compared my life to his. And I do think I've faced hardships, but I will say, like, when I look at what he faced, it almost feels like wrong to complain. But, and I know it's a little bit of a different playing field because this was 2 generations ago after the war. But it also goes back to the analogy about the physical pain of the heart, the person with the heart issue versus the ankle. I guess you could say my Nonno had the heart issue and I have an ankle. And they are still both important. I would acknowledge that. His story just really gives me a lot of courage. I feel like if you simply go 2 generations back and talk to your grandparents, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a generation that had resilience, strength, and grit. Because I don't know about you as a younger person, it's like, what happened to us? Why? Why are we all struggling so much? Like when you do these comparisons. And I think our grandparents are a lot of people that went through hell and didn't break. And again, it's not me trying to compare my story to my grandfather's, but I find his story and stories like that inspiring because what I've noticed is the people who have been through the most in their life, they're often the ones who come out with this victor mindset. And if there's one thing I do remember about my grandfather is that he was a man of few words and that he did not complain and that he didn't wallow. He was always in action. He was always doing. And why? Because honestly, having the time to sit around for yourself and feel sorry for yourself and think about yourself, I do think that's a privilege. And my grandfather and a lot of people of his generation, they didn't have that time to spiral. They had to survive. They had to get up and work. They had to put food on the table. And again, I've thought about this a lot. And I do think that it's a privilege to have space, time, and the mental energy to sit around and feel sorry for yourself. So don't get me wrong. I still fall into these funks sometimes. I still have really hard days where I feel stuck and I want to retreat. But a lot of days when I do, I think of him and I think of people like him. And it genuinely does inspire me to push harder and to remember that, yes, life is hard. Yes, life is unfair, but that doesn't mean I can't be strong. It doesn't mean I don't have control because I do. I just have to make that choice. I don't want to simply survive. I want to be a victor. And what's crazy and powerful to me is that somebody that I really never truly knew had such a deep impact on me. My Nonno, again, has inspired me in so many ways that I can't really explain. And I'm still figuring out. And what he left behind, and the fact that I think about him like this, I think that's the power of choosing to live as a victor. You have this deep influence. When you step into that mindset, you don't just change your own life, you influence the people around you. And sometimes those are people you'll never even meet. So, again, I really believe this to be true because my grandfather lived that way. And all I've ever heard is stories. And in those stories and in the love that I see my mom has for him when she talks about him, I can literally feel that strength. And again, it's just really given me a lot of courage and motivation and resilience to push through the difficult moments in my life. And to be honest, it's one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to start this podcast because I wanted to remind people that God, you're always in the driver's seat. You're always in control, even when it doesn't feel like it, even when life is breaking you. With all this said, I've never pretended that bad things don't happen. They do. They will. But I've always believed in holding that truth alongside a stronger one, which is yes, life can suck. Yes, terrible things happen, but you have the power. You have the choice. And your response is where the power lies and lives. And that's the victor mindset. I really believe that that's the victor mindset. So, how do we actually do this? How do we choose to be a victor in our day to day lives? How do we adopt this mindset? How do we shift from being parked in victimhood and to driving forward as victors? Um, I want to start out with saying that it's not about just positive thinking or ignoring your reality. I think it's about practical steps you can take slowly to reclaim your power. So, let's get into a few that I think are going to help you get back into that driver's seat. First, I think you really do have to acknowledge your pain without letting it define you. Again, for a long time in my life, I thought, I can't talk about my pain. My pain, no, it doesn't matter because people have been through way worse things than I have. That got me nowhere. That got me absolutely nowhere. You can't just suppress all the time because, well, what? Do we all have to have horrible, terrible lives? Like, no. You have to acknowledge what's hurt you. And you can't help that. You can't help that maybe you were born into a different country or place than someone else. Like, again, I don't want you to suppress what you're feeling fully. Um, Again, victims say I'm broken, but victors say I'm healing. Victims say this is who I am, but victors say this is something that happened to me, but it's not my whole story. I really think with acknowledging your pain and not letting it define you, your language really matters. And the story that you're telling yourself in your head really matters. Try to look back at stories you've been telling yourself for a long time and look more for the truth in them. Like, think about if you ask, let's say, your mom or your dad, let's say they're the ones that hurt you, what story would they tell? Would it look very differently than yours? Have you ever had an honest conversation about that? Because again, our brains love to hold on to the negative and tell ourselves what we want to hear. So, make sure that you're seeking the truth when you do this as well. And again, in your language, don't say things like, I'll never recover from this or this always happens to me. I want you to say things like, I'm working through this. Yes, this happened to me, but now I'm trying to figure out my next step. Second, I want you to focus on what you can control, not what you can't. This is a game changer because when something difficult happens, train to ask yourself, what's in my power right now and what is this teaching me? Maybe you can't control that you lost your job or you lost your parent, but you can control how you structure your day for looking for a good, sorry. Maybe, for example, you can't control that you lost your job, but you can control how you structure your day while looking for a new one. Maybe you can't control that someone hurt you, but you can control the boundaries you set moving forward. Maybe you can't control a health diagnosis, but you can control how you respond to treatment recommendations. These are just a few examples. There's always something, even if it's just breathing or your thought life, that remains within your control. So find what's in your control and start there. Third, and this one I do think is really tough, practice feeling genuine joy for others instead of resentment. One of the hallmarks of a victim mindset is seeing everyone else's good fortune as a reminder of what you lack. I had this realization actually really recently because I was watching this YouTube video and she had something I've deeply wanted. And at first I felt that, pang of like jealousy and sadness. But then I kept watching and I was thinking. I saw how happy she was and how much what she had that I wanted brought so much joy and meaning to her life. And I started thinking, I'm so happy she got to experience this. Like, I started to have joy for her. Like, victims will see other people's blessings or luckiness, whatever you like to call it, as this personal attack of, well, why them and not me? But victors see other people's blessings, luckiness as proof that good things are possible and that maybe if they strive hard enough, they can get that too. If it exists for them, it can exist for me, even if it's in a different form. So I think that's huge. Stop seeing other people's good things as this personal attack on yourself. Is it true that life is unfair and maybe they got a head start in something? Yeah, it is. It is unfair. Like, again, going back to life is a biatch. Like, I will acknowledge that. But those were the cards they were dealt. These were the cards you were dealt. It's not going to save anybody time if we sit there and pout about our hand. Fourth, create your own inner spring even during life's winters. So let me explain myself. Tony Robbins talks about the four seasons of history and life. I found this to be super interesting. He says that spring brings growth, summer brings tension, fall brings prosperity and complacency, and winter brings crisis and fear. Right now, many of us feel like we're in winter. And I actually do think, from a historical point of view, we are in a winter because there's just fear everywhere. I mean, literally, on Monday, the entire country of Spain lost electric. I was not there. I am elsewhere right now. Insane. The world is chaotic and it feels chaotic, but here's the truth. While you can't control the season that the world is in, you can choose your own season. So, something that he said that I really liked was, followers follow the culture, but leaders create their own culture. You don't need to wait for the government to give you peace, for your parents to give you peace, for your significant other to give you peace, to feel peace. You can find it on your own. You can take control of your life. You can create your own spring in the middle of winter. And also, he talked about these seasons from a historical point of view, but remember, I said history and life. I think I mentioned this in one of my other podcasts, but I think we go through these four seasons throughout our life. Maybe right now you're in a winter and it's going to be a lot harder, but winters don't last forever and you'll make it to summer again. So just remember that. All right, fifth, and this is a daily practice, ask yourself victor questions instead of victim questions. Victim, victim questions sound like this: why does this always happen to me? Who's to blame for this? Why bother trying to do this when nothing ever works out for me? But victor's questions sound like, what can I learn from this difficult experience? How can I grow through this challenge? What's the next small step I can take to get myself out of this emotional state that I've been in for a long time that's really torturing me? So, again, the questions that you ask yourself and the way you see the difficulties in your life at the moment really matter a lot, because what we focus on is what we feel like we're living all the time. And this is something that Tony Robbins said as well. So, yeah, focus on how you can get out of whatever that you're in. And lastly, remember that choosing to be a victor is not a one time decision. It's a choice you have to make every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, because there's going to be setbacks, right? Like, you're going to have winter seasons in your life. There's going to be days when you're like, I just have to park the car today. I can't move forward. And that's okay. That's normal. Take those pauses when you need them. Just the key to recognize is when you're slipping back, maybe into that victim mode, try to gently guide yourself back to victor mode and into that driver's seat. Because the truth is that life is just a journey, it's not a destination. And when we do get to those destinations, they literally last a week. I'll never forget when someone said that you work so hard to get your college degree after 4 years, then you walk across that stage, you get your diploma, And now you all of a sudden have a new problem, which is you need to get a job. And I remember thinking exactly that when I got my diploma. I was like, I worked so hard for this piece of paper. My destination lasted for literally a day because then had to get out and get a job. That's just the reality of life. So remember with all this again, you're behind the wheel. You get to choose your response. You're not stuck. You're probably just parked temporarily, but you can always put those keys back in the ignition and drive on. So, before I get into the conclusion, I wanted to include one more section about the ripple effect that I think choosing a victor has. I already touched about this a little bit with my grandfather. And I think that when you choose to live as a victor rather than a victim, something really remarkable can happen. And that is that it's not just your own life that changes, but I really think you can begin to transform the world around you. So, one powerful practice that builds a victor mindset is gratitude. And I don't mean surface level gratitude of, oh, I'm grateful for my coffee. That's great. And I'm very grateful for that, as you know. I mean the kind of gratitude that there's this deeper appreciation that comes from recognizing that even in your struggles, there are gifts. Um, and also, gratitude is the opposite of victimhood. So it's kind of like you're fighting it really head on. When you're stuck in a victim mindset, all you can see is what's missing, what's wrong, what you don't have, what's been taken away from you. But gratitude shifts your focus to what you have, what's working, what's been given to you. I found that when I'm most tempted to feel like a victim, that's precisely when I probably need gratitude the most because it's almost like turning on the light in a dark room. Suddenly you can see what's been there all along. And I know some people might be like, well, that's just toxic positivity or blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. This is what I'm going to ask you. But what's the alternative if you don't do this? To hate the world around you, to hate yourself, to hate people, to always blame other people, to hate the country that you live in, to constantly only think about yourself and your problems? Is that what you want to tell me is what you should do? Okay. I don't think that's an alternative. Um, I think the more you think about yourself, the more miserable you are. Come fight me. This is what I've experienced. The more I think about myself, what Maria wants, Maria's needs, I literally feel like I can equate that to anxiety and depression. It's terrible. It's terrible always thinking about yourself. And if you choose this path, you are headed for resentment, you're headed for bitterness, hatred, self-loathing, jealousy. That's what you're headed for. So, are these the best alternatives? Okay. I mean, if you can acknowledge that that's what's going to happen, listen, I'm willing to hear your version. I'm willing to hear how that will get you to where you want to go. But yeah, I just don't know what the alternative is. Um, so this reminds me of something that I've really realized recently, which is going back to that YouTube video that I mentioned where this girl had something that I've very much so deeply wanted. And, initially I felt that jealousy, I felt that pang, like, oh, why did she get this and not me? But then I said that I started to feel joy for her and I started to feel like I'm so happy somebody got to experience this. Like I'm so happy this exists. Um, and then I was sitting with it a little bit longer and I had a really amazing realization. And I realized that the thing that I was jealous of, this thing that I felt really lacked in my own life, I actually had it. I just got it in a completely different form. Life had given it to me in an unexpected way. It was something I already cherished deeply. I just didn't connect the dots until that moment. It was like life was saying, you thought you needed it to look exactly like this, but I gave you the essence of what you needed, designed in a package specifically for you. And That's the victor mindset. And when I came to realize that, I just couldn't stop smiling. And I really think that when you stop fixating on what you think you should have, you can recognize how there's a really good chance that life has already provided what you truly needed. You just have to sit there and connect the dots. I actually remember this is a conversation that I had with my mentor, and she said that life has this funny way of, when we lack something in our life, we get it in a different way, form, or person. And we were specifically talking about uh, fathers in this time we were talking. And she was saying, I've noticed that a lot of people who did not have this masculine father figure in their life, that somehow later in their life, someone came into their life and became that figure for them. It's like life saw that lack and said, I saw that you didn't have this, and here it is. And you might be asking, well, how does this happen? How do I know I'm going to get this? I don't know. But I think it starts with having a victor mindset, and I think it starts with being grateful. Um, Again, I really think life has this funny way of giving you what you lacked if only you're ready and willing to receive it. And I think it's in very many times in forms you didn't expect. But when you're stuck in victim mode, again, I think you're so busy at looking what you can't see that you're missing what's already there or what could already be there. Okay, I had something come to mind about uh some people might understand this a little bit more about this principle, what I'm saying of if something that you're lacking comes to you in another form. Think about it this way. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, I haven't met anybody romantically." And some people will say, well, are you like open to it? Do you have like this energy to meet people? Are you looking for these opportunities? And a lot of times people are like, well, no. And I've talked about this with a lot of women that, like, when they finally were open to it, when they were trying to tell themselves a story in their head of, no, but there are good guys out there, good guys that I would want to be with. And I'm going to open myself up to these opportunities. I'm going to open my mind. I'm going to give off this energy, that when they did that, they met people. They met the men they wanted to be with. So I want to give this example because I think people will really understand this example and will agree with this example. And again, I think it goes back to when you let go of being this victim and stop thinking about what you don't have. And when you think about what I was saying, becoming grateful for what you do have, I think this opens the door to receiving these good things in your life that you've always wanted to but never could before. Because I think victim keeps you with like the door closed, but entering this victor mindset opens the door. Anyways, I just wanted to like make that analogy because maybe that's a more common one I've heard than the one I'm making, and I wanted it to make sense. So I think this is what happens when you shift from victor to victim. You start to see, sorry, victim to victor. You start to see how your very struggles have shaped you in ways that make you also uniquely powerful. And you start to begin to recognize that what looked like a detour was maybe the exact path that you needed to take. There's been something that I've been like grieving that's very, very personal to me. And for the first like 3 months, I was just upset about it. I allowed myself to be upset about it because it was legitimate. But then I started to be like, okay, how has this made me become somebody that I probably never would have had become if I didn't have this experience? And that has just been such an amazing game changer because I actually think I would be a very different person if I would have had what I so deeply wanted. Am I still sad I didn't get that? Yes. Can I now look and see how that has made me so much of who I am today in a good, positive way? Yes. And that's called the law of polarity. Look into it. Take the bad things that have happened to you and think about how they've shaped you into who you've become and how they've helped you. See them as an opportunity to grow. Okay. Again, you begin to recognize those things, then those struggles that made you uniquely powerful. And here's where the ripple effect comes in. When you live this way, when you choose victory over victimhood, you don't just change your own life. I think you change the lives of everyone around you. Because again, back to my grandfather, who I didn't know, I really do think about how he's influenced me so profoundly. And I really think it just goes back to choosing this victor mentality because he left a legacy. He created a legacy and he left one. And that legacy has extended so far beyond himself. And again, Tony Robbins talked about this in that cycle of history thing that I mentioned, that easy times make weak people create bad times create strong people create easy times. I think right now we had easy times and we're seeing a lot of weak people. Like that's, I think, the story of our parents. But I think now, as their progeny, we've been going through really bad times. And I don't know about you, but I think it's been creating stronger people. And he said that's the cycle of history. I will say it again. The cycle of history is easy times make weak people create bad times create strong people create easy times. When I actually first heard this, like this history cycle or this cycle in history, I was like, wow, that's it? Like, should I was like, shouldn't it be way more complicated than this? But then, like, I literally just started thinking about that and I was like, this kind of makes sense. And I really, when I was listening to Tony Robbins talk about this, I loved it because it helped me understand that everything is a pattern. There's a bigger story, and we're just going through these cycle loops. And fear, chaos, conflict, like, it's nothing to be scared of. Like, again, I do think right now we're in a winter as a earth, as a entire society. Like, we've just been going through it. And many of us feel that so deeply. And there's fear everywhere. People are disconnected, anxious, overwhelmed about money, overwhelmed about everything. But I loved hearing Tony Robbins say that because he made me realize it's all cyclical. Like the good times will come back. And I feel that this gives me hope because winter doesn't last forever. Spring always follows. And he said a lot about how some of the greatest things in history were born in winter. Again, pressure creates diamonds. Hard times create strong people. I do think we're going through really hard times right now. And I really hope it encourages people to be strong. And we get to choose to become those people because, again, we can't control the season that we were born in, the season that the world is in. But like I've been saying the whole time, you can choose your own season. You can choose how you respond. Your choice to be a victor, to stay in the driver's seat of your life, even when the road gets rough. That choice has so much power beyond what you can imagine because it influences your friends, your family, your community. And I really believe it creates a ripple effect that can transform culture. So maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what our world needs right now. People who refuse to be paralyzed by fear, people who acknowledge life's hardships but choose courage anyway, and people who just don't survive but shape the future. That was my Nonno. Because victors don't just drive on themselves, they show others how to do it too. We made it to the end. Um, I feel like I actually, for the first time with all my episodes, I really took the time to bring in examples that I hadn't planned and share with you guys. I hope they made a lot of sense. I started this episode talking about my grandfather and how he lost his father when he was so young and how he had to be a provider, but how he didn't let that define him. Instead, he allowed it to make him become a hard worker and somebody who moved forward despite the incredible challenges that life kept handing him. And he did that for years. Like I said, it was probably 20 plus years before things changed and, things got better, but they did. And of course, I don't know everything that happened along the way. I wasn't able to talk to him. Um, But I want to say something else, that he wasn't special because he suffered. We all suffer. Like, your suffering doesn't make you special. I know that probably sounds so harsh, but it doesn't, because everyone suffers. Your suffering isn't special. There is definitely somebody that has experienced what you have. Maybe not in the exact same way, because nobody can be born in the same time of history, into the same family, into the same culture. But a lot of times, I think what we feel is so personal and that only we're experiencing. There's actually so many other people who are right there with us. So yeah, he wasn't special that he suffered. I think what made him remarkable was what he chose to do with that suffering. Because he didn't just want to survive, he was motivated, he didn't complain, and he really did leave a legacy that extended so far beyond him. And I am proof of that. I am a product of how his work and dedication and grit, no, not a product. I'm a living example of how his hard work has given me such a good and comfortable life. And I think about that so deeply and so much, and I think I'm going to think about that for the rest of my life, which is why thinking about him lately has moved me so deeply, because it amazes me how one person's choice to be a victor and to strive on has influenced so many lives, because it's influenced my uncles and aunts, my mom, my dad, my cousins. Like, what he did set us all up for a lot of success. Now, we've had to face our hardships too, because just because you're left something doesn't mean it'll be prosperous. Like, you have to put in the work too, but he was a victor. And his story reminds me of a truth that I really hope you take away from everything I've said today, which is life will knock you down. That is inevitable. It's going to present you with circumstances you didn't choose and you didn't deserve. You will, at various points in your life, be a victim of something. It's not me trying to be pessimistic, it's just reality. But again, like I've been saying, being a victim, it's not your identity. The real question isn't whether bad things will happen. The question is, will you stay parked in that pain, or will you find the courage to drive on? What I know is you are always in the driver's seat, always, even when the road is terrifying, even when you feel like you've run out of gas, even when you can't see through the fog. You have the power to choose. You have the keys to move forward and put into the ignition. And that's not just a nice saying. Like, this is a truth that will transform your life if you remember how much power you have and how you're always driving. Again, victors stay parked. Victims, ugh, no, I said it wrong. Victims stay parked. Victors drive on. So I want to leave you with this question. Where in your life have you been parked? Where have you been telling yourself a story that keeps you stuck? Where have you been giving away your power to circumstances, to other people, to the past? And more importantly, are you ready to put your life in drive again? Because you can. Right now, today, in this moment, you get to wake up and make a choice every day. Life is tough, but you're tougher. I think you're meant to be a victor and not a victim. And your journey, your drive, it's just beginning, because this is your life, your car, your journey. And I believe that you have the power to drive on. Thank you so much for being here. I really hope this podcast and this episode makes sense. It was a really important one to me. So, yeah, thanks again for listening this far. And I will catch you in the next episode.